found the artist group the Brücke in 1905 until 1930, and also produced works that have become world famous. Kirchner Nolde aren't really the subject of this exhibition, but their art gives us reason to reflect on colonialism, the colonial past, and its continued influence on our world and our thoughts nowadays. Now, when you enter the exhibition, you will see this huge map based on the actual proportion of the world, and here is not Europe that takes the center stage, but rather the ocean. And the map symbolizes the lens through which this exhibition was conceived. In this exhibition, we speak about Germany, but it's all the same for all of Europe. This is an attempt to free ourselves of the reflexive habit of Eurocentrism and broaden everyone's horizon. It's also an invitation to you all and to add new layers of meaning that to add new layers of meaning to what we already know. Now there are 4 themes in the exhibition. I will translate it to you. First of all, you will find a theme about the ethnographic museums. There is a theme, the colonial exhibitions and the entertainment culture. The theme, the Kirchner and his studios, and at last Nolde's journey to Papua New Guinea. And I will briefly explain the 4 themes in this introduction. The themes are also echoed in the design of the exhibition. Every time when you continue to a new theme, you will feel so by walking through the corridors between the galleries. Now, the ethnographic museums during the era of the German Empire. One gallery in this exhibition is devoted to the origins of the ethnographic museums in Germany and to their collections, and especially also how they were presented, and to how Kirchner and Nolde came to see them in the first place and why we still have access to them today. The origins of these museums are closely related to colonialism in Germany. Following the unification of Germany in 1871 and the German Empire's development of colonial ambitions, events began to move at a rapid pace. Objects were taken not just from the colonized countries, but from all over the world. And these museums served as a sort of library for anthropologists, or rather as armchairs for these anthropologists. They attempted to build a picture of various cultures through the objects they studied, and in particular to emphasize the differences between other cultures and their own. For Kirchner and Nolde, walking through these exhibitions in the ethnographic museums, it was like Google nowadays. The museums enable them to take a look at other cultures. It literally opened up the world to them. How did they view these objects of cultural heritage? On this slide you can see the artwork made by Kirchner Nolde, Mann, Frau und Katze, made in 1912. You can just imagine them walking through the exhibitions in these museums, and from time to time Nolde made sketches of artworks from various cultures and combined them later on in his studio into a single painting. Thus, figures from different cultures were forced into a dialogue, as you can see over here. You can let your imagination run wild with this one. What could be going on between the man, the woman and the cat? But some of the figures in Nolde's painting can be traced straight back to sculptures that remain part of museum collections in Berlin. The blue-clad figure on the right, for instance, was inspired by one that normally resides atop a king's throne, specifically that of King Nyoya of Banu, out of Cameroon. Here you see the throne. This blue-clad figure with the bow is a single detail of the throne, which in reality features several wood carvings with shell inlaid. It's an impressive object with great symbolic value for the Bamon people. King Nyoya gave this unique object to the German Emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II, in 1908. in exchange for a musical instrument with a painted portrait of the emperor on it. It was in truth a diplomatic gift to maintain relations with the colonial ruler. But just for you to understand, this throne is unique, there is no other throne like it. But the musical instrument that was gave in return was made of several objects of the same musical instruments were made, and you can find them all over the world as a diplomatic gift of William II. Nowadays, it's a controversial object, this throne. It's currently still in the collection of the Humboldt Forum in Berlin, and the Bambouk people have requested its restitution as it was ceded under political pressure. They want it back in the palace alongside those of King Joya's predecessors and successors. What on earth is Bambouk throne? What on earth is the Bambouk throne doing in Berlin? They ask. And variations of the same question now face all the museums embroiled in restitution disputes. So you can find the same discussion going on also here in the Netherlands. In addition to frequenting ethnographic museums, the artist also attended colonial exhibitions in order to see people from other cultures. People from colonized countries were taken to Germany to work in colonial exhibitions. Entire villages were recreated for their display, where they would remain for months. The participants, these were the participants, they were dressed in traditional garments and had to reenact rituals from their culture for the pleasure of the inquisitive German public. There was no question of cultural exchange over here, but it's simply one group gawping at the other. There are not so many testimonials that still exist for those who display at these exhibitions. We do know that these individuals were paid volunteers, but the humiliation of their experience isn't hard to imagine. Interviews with participants show that they came to Germany with quite different expectations. They had arrived hoping to see something of the country and get an education. That's something that we added to the exhibition here as well. We don't only use the written sources and visual sources, but also the oral sources. Their lives are the subject matter of this room, with a focus on their motivations and ambitions. For instance, regarding Togolese leader Nayo Cruz, who also used to be a participant, he took part in such a colonial exhibition in Berlin, but later he returned to Germany as the manager of his own show, featuring fellow Togolese people, often friends and family, with which he toured around Europe. The difference between Mr. Bruce and the people that you can see over here, that now he is taking the strings in his own hands, just to translate a Dutch expression straight into English. And as I said before, another way of getting acquainted with a different culture was to go to the theater. There was a group of performers touring through Europe around the 1900s. People from America, originally from Africa, so African Americans. They included singers, dancers, musicians, cabaret artists, and performed in theaters all over Europe. In Kirchner, he was a theater lover. He attended several of these performances in Germany and captured what he saw in drawings, in paintings, and as you can see later on also in woodcut. Now for Kirchner, he brought the other world also inside his own studio. He had two studios, one in Dresden and one in Berlin, and he started to decorate his studio with his own work from 1909. You can find paintings, but also fabrics that were painted and hand-carved furniture. And the studio for Kirchner was much more than just a place to work. It was also a place where art and life met, and where members of the Brücke used to hang out. It was a place where they started to experiment with their own work. And for instance, instead of having nude models maintaining fixed poses while being sketched, Kirchner asked them to move around through the studio, and this forced the artist to work in a different way. If people are moving around, and the sketching has to be much faster, and therefore the way of depicting something changed. The studio can be seen quite a lot of his sketches and his paintings, and often you can see that the colorful decor is as much the subject of these works as the models they portray. As you can see in this painting, for instance, from our own collection. It's a painting, Naked Girl Behind a Curtain, made in 1910. Franzi, you can find written between brackets. And these kind of paintings made the works from Kirchner world famous. You can see a naked girl emerging from behind a curtain. On her left, there is a carved stool, and such stools were known as koos, that's the name of such a stool, and they came from Cameroon. They were a staple of these stools that you can find all over the German ethnographic collections, and we know that Kirchner himself had one as well. We don't know how he obtained it. And it's carved from a single piece of wood. It incorporates a leopard, which is the symbol of strength. It's over here. This koo can be seen also in the exhibition. Now, in Cameroon, these koos were only used by men of a certain status, those who were the rulers of different tribes. Kirchner, however, had these new models posing on it. Franzi is standing next to it, but if you visit the exhibition, you can also see paintings and sketches where the nudes are sitting on these stools. It's not known whether Kirchner knew about the original function of these stools or not. But that is one of the questions that we have, that we ask nowadays. How much you can allow cultural appropriation enter your work, or the way that we appreciate it nowadays. We try as much as possible to find out more about the artworks that you can find in those paintings, but also who are the models, which is quite difficult if it's about models of color. About this model, as you can see, she is not a model of color, although he changed the color of her hair. She is a natural blonde, and also changed the way her eyes are placed in her face. The eyes have now a slight angle so as to make her appear more Asian. But this girl is about 10 years old when Kirchner made the painting, and her name is Nina Francisca. She was a daughter of a widow in Berlin who needed the money, so Franzi, she was getting paid for her modeling work, not only by Kirchner but also by other artists of the Brücke, and she used to model until the age of 16. This is also quite an interesting topic to explore, whether or not this was done voluntarily or not. Kirchner never traveled outside Europe, Nolde did. And here you can see a painting that he made in 1914 after he returned from his journey, the Medical Demographic German New Guinea expedition, organized by the Imperial Colonial Office in Germany. The expedition was led by 2 doctors, and Nolde and his wife, Ada, were allowed to come along as guests as well. The purpose of this exhibition was actually quite clear. It was to establish the causes of high mortality on the islands, an economic problem for the colonial power, for it could lead to labor shortages on the coconut plantations. The couple joined the expedition for about 6 months, in which Nolde made sketches and paintings, including watercolors, while Ada took pictures and kept a journal. Now, a series of watercolor portraits that Nolde made over there was of inhabitants of Papua New Guinea, showed as to, in his own words, map the characteristics of the different races. And the attention that he paid to the skin color, to the hair type, to facial features is evident. These individuals were studied, portrayed, and classified. It's not a portrait as we know it, acting nowadays by photographers, but more for scientifically purposes, so to say. And Nolde was well aware of the situation in Papua New Guinea. He knew of the existence of the plantations, for which a great part of the forests were demolished. He knew of the people's resistance to work on these plantations, and he also knew of the presence of missionaries on the land to convert the local inhabitants to Christianity. But despite all the problems that you can find and the inequality on the island, he chose to present his audience with an idealized vision of people living on a simple, carefree life in harmony with nature. And they are very deftly painted, highly colorful works, and you can see a mother and a child, people swimming, people fishing, and unspoiled nature. But there's no trace of colonial rule that exists in these paintings. Now the works of Kirchner and Nolde are nowadays part of the Western canon of art, but you can ask yourself whether or not that canon is complete. We try to add more works to that canon, not so much the Western canon maybe anymore, but more kind of worthy canon, where Western art and art from outside Europe coexist next to each other on the same level. Well, do you have any questions?